I am now going to call upon Kencho Peldon, who is our second speaker and will be speaking on regulating farmer seed saving practices, and plant intellectual property in Bhutan. And also to the discussant, I have 6 messages here, so perhaps there is a change. Okay. As of my understanding at this point, our discussant is Dr. Astamaya Tama, but maybe perhaps that's not the case. I'm not sure. But in any case, if we are making any mistakes along this way, please bear with us again. Who is from the National Biodiversity Center and is currently traveling and is in Dagana at the moment. But upon Kencho Peldon, please to present the paper.
Hi, Kuzambo, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those joining this virtual. For some reason, I can't share my screen. Hello, can you all hear me, first of all?
Yes, we can hear you. And since you are the co-host, you should be able to. Could I call upon
the options to share my screen? It's
right. We'll find a way shortly. Let me see if I'm told that you do have sharing permissions.
Okay.
There should be a button at the bottom of the screen that says share screen.
Yeah, and okay, now I can do it.
Yes, okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yes, thank you very much again. I would like to firstly thank the Center for the Study of Democracy, University of Westminster, the Center for Local Governance and Research for giving this opportunity to present. I'd like to firstly draw everyone's attention to one of the programs that the Bhutan Broadcasting Services ran in 2019, which was called Seed Keepers of Biodemocracy in Samduzongkha district. So I'm just going to quote a statement from the website, which is under the Samduzongkha initiative of Seed Community System. And it says, food is a cornerstone of gross national happiness, Bhutan's development goal. It manifests the interplay of socio-cultural, economical, ecological, and governance aspect of development. Therefore, it calls for preservation and promotion of local and traditional seeds. So my talk today, which is farmer seed saving and plant intellectual property in Bhutan, is going to focus on a very narrow aspect of the basic agriculture production system, which is the seed. And seed being the carrier of genetic resources is very much the target of so many factors that shape the agriculture system. And to do this, I have structured my presentation into 2 parts. Framework to look at the seed system in Bhutan, which is to, I apologize that I had to look at the, draw from my own research, which is to look at the regulation system in the British India system in the 1820s on managing and regulating seed and crop productions in British India. So I'll draw upon this aspect of how law and evolved in historical time, and use that framework to analyze the Bhutan's seed regulation and plant intellectual property law. And in the final part of my presentation, I'll offer some concluding thought. So seed sharing is an age-old tradition and customs and practices of every agriculture farming communities. But as I seed as a building block of agriculture, and in that, the seed helps to produce crop varieties for nutritional, for climate responsive, for food security. So in that context, the seed sharing for farming community and agriculture production, couched under what is called seed access, use, and exchange, is the core of the modern or pre-modern or traditional agriculture system. For my discussions and talk, I'm looking at this set of legal backgrounds which regulate the plant genetic resources and plant intellectual property together. So I'll be drawing frameworks from the biodiversity regulations and the patent system, and sort of also draw the international multilateral systems to regulation and seed circulation. And you will note that I'm looking at very specific aspect of seed, which is the intellectual property or patents that's being embedded in the production of seeds for agricultural productions. So to go on to the first part of my presentation, which is to look at the 19th century British India plant production and agriculture system that gave rise to a regulatory system that shaped the agriculture needs of that period. So the creation of seed regulation in British India, which is, they implemented a series of laws from 1829 to 1935. In that period, who had virtual monopoly in terms of cotton textile manufacture, and the political economy surrounding this manufacturing industry shaped how raw materials were produced in different colonies and under the British Empire. And they needed specific high quality or specific quality of crops and raw materials for their manufacturing needs. So on that term, the British India to help the help Britain extract raw materials, and in this case it's the cotton plant, the fiber for their manufacturing needs. And under this agriculture system is the aspect of how the British India control the seed circulation, distribution, and replantation of particular aspect of. Explain how all of this being is developed. Before Britain drew cotton from India, British were already drawing high quality cotton fiber from America in 1790s. So America, by that sense, were much ahead in terms of plant breeding, responded to climatic conditions, or which responded to disease and pest resistance. The notable incident here is the insect pest, which is boll weevil infestation in 1890s, which infected almost 90% of US cotton crop in 1890s. So in response to that, the agriculture system in US were breeding pest or disease. For example, crops were early maturing, or they were frost tolerant. So in order to avoid the gestation period of this pest, but there were other traits like the amount of fiber content in the crop was also being enhanced through breeding crops which bore bigger cotton balls to have. Here is the American agriculture system, which supplied to Britain prior to India becoming an alternative replacement for supplying cotton fiber to British manufacturing industry. So in the US, now US already had unique legal and agriculture production system that corresponded to supplying of high quality cotton fiber. Now, from 1790s onwards, up until 1925, their cotton production were organized what was called under overarching one variety cotton system. In that, the government, the state, allowed or permitted cotton growers and cotton planters to grow only specific crop variety. All other varieties were, made illegal to looking to standardize and improve the cotton from America being produced and sent to Britain. By that nature, the cotton industry that developed in Britain was becoming more specialized in terms of just manufacturing fabrics to transitioning in terms of producing high quality and different sort of usage in industries like fiber production. Now, the American one variety cotton produce specific crop variety and specific cotton crop fiber. And there were other laws that were implemented over time, like which were to regulate how the seed moved from one state to another, which is called interstate quarantine laws, to ensure that disease and pest did not travel from one state to another, to producing only specific crop variety. Now, associated with that was the shaping of all aspects of cotton manufacture. In that, the post-harvest management of cotton became much more important. The mechanization of cotton picking were being developed. There were certain storage systems that were being organized under certain law. For example, in 1914, which required that certain specific cotton be grown and stored in a public government-run storage system. Other than that, the storage system were not accepting other cotton crop that were producing fiber. Alongside the process how the cotton were transported from one state to another was also being shaped, because it was critical that only this, also the packaging system, because it was important for the agricultural system to indicate that where this cotton was grown and what is the staple length, the fiber length of that crop for production of the other associated production system requirement of that cotton fiber. So these all were being shaped in that process, and you can imagine that this kind of high quality crop was being exported to Britain, and Britain was used to high quality cotton crop from America. But what came was, in that period, was the American Civil War, which took place from 1861 to 1865. which threatened the supply of raw cotton to British cotton manufacturing needs. And the this was the basic or underlying motivation for the British Empire to move out and explore alternative sources of raw cotton supply. So in that, they looked at West Africa, at African colonies, and ultimately landed in British India as a suitable replacement to produce cotton and supply to British cotton manufacturing needs on three grounds. Then subcontinent, by that extension, knowledge and skills existed among farming community to grow cotton, plant cotton, harvest cotton, and attend to the agricultural needs of that cotton production. India also had pre-colonial indigenous textile industry, very much highly specialized. Now I'll take a little bit of time scale, a little bit in what I'm periodization of this talk. High quality textiles were being, transported to other parts of the world. It was the major commodity that was being, shipped out from Indian subcontinent, especially from India, places from modern day Kerala, which is called Coromandel Coast, Cochin, and there were places like in Madras Presidency, Bombay Presidency, which produced high quality calico textiles. And then these were shipped to other parts of the world. The British saw that India was the natural replacement to manufacture or produce raw cotton and supply to Britain. Now, under this assumption, the British India imported the cotton germplasm of American crop varieties in 1840s, before this American Civil War, but you'll have to bear with me. Like the cotton crop, organization of how it was bought in the by the trading system affected some of the major underlying reason for Britain to attempt to explore and diversify their cotton supply. And some of the American planters were sent in the period 1840s, 60s, 1890s to India to transplant this cotton crop under what is called exotic germplasm. Now I'm bringing this seed as a germplasm, as a genetic resource that's being shipped and transplanted in India. With that, the British brought along the economic prospect of growing what's called the long staple American cotton to the farming community, and entice the merchants to produce and deal with this particular commodity now. But unfortunately, this also is the problem of mixing the crop and selling under the falsely claiming as a long staple cotton fiber. And this became a perennial problem for British administration in India to enact some of the regulation to shape particular aspects of cotton production geared toward producing the long staple cotton fiber. I would like to upfront say that this wasn't very successful, but over time, when the plant became acclimatized in the 1930s and 1940s, the crop became to produce some of the closer genetic resemblance and genetic traits that the American cotton had. So you can see in this slide, there were a number of laws which were enacted in specific requirements of the aspect, because looking at how specific aspects led to broader agriculture production system affected the law making processes. And in this series of laws, you will see that the cotton laws were either focused on the commodity or the crop or the biological reproductive material of the plant for the British administration to, at the time they were maybe legally experimenting or scientifically experimenting which seeds variety, which crop varieties were effective. So all of this were what is called cotton improvement experimentation of the British India government and led to the enactment of some of these regulatory system. So all this law prescribed certain aspects for the local merchants and farmers to grow cotton, and they were made liable for what I said, the cotton mixing problem. And it was termed cotton adulteration. Now, there were three different types of cotton mixing or adulteration that took place, which were, first was very simple mixing, which was adding external substances like sand or dirt onto the cotton and selling it as a long staple cotton, because cotton was sold by weight, and the farmers were taking advantage of that fact that this fiber was sold by weight, and they were adding sophisticated type of mixing, which is adding moisture on the cotton when they transported cotton from one place to another. Now, agriculturally, they claimed that this was important because long distances travel tend to deteriorate the quality of the cotton fiber because of gathering dust and long distance travel transportation. So the farmers claimed that they had to add water constantly to keep the natural India administration at the time claimed that this was in violation of what the fiber was being sold as a weight, and excessive moisture tend to fraudulently increase that weight in the cotton plant or fiber. And finally, which is more problematic, and they understood towards 1930s or 1935 that the genetic mixing was the major. Now this one, because the cotton crop, in comparison to other cash crop or other plantation crop like rubber or rice or other plants, cotton crop cross-pollinated easily in the fields. So it was possible that short and long staple, if grown in the same fields, could cross-pollinate and grow and hybridize the varieties, and it led to what's called mongrelization of the production, which is from the start of planting what seed, harvesting particular cotton, packaging, transportation, warehousing, all were subjected to oversight by the British administration. And they also introduced under these laws, which over the time of implementation became necessary, is to, the introduction of licenses, where the farmers and merchants were required to obtain license from the or grow, long staple cotton in particular place. And also, which I have not mentioned in this slide, is they also legally drew boundaries where farmers and merchants could grow particular crop in that specific place, and they couldn't grow anywhere they liked it, because the reason that crop could cross-pollinate and it would jeopardize the cotton experimentation of the British India government. Applying seeds that were being experimentally bred in their experimental stations, and it was the property of the state, and the farmers were prevented from sharing the seeds to their other farmers or among themselves, and it was preventing. But the laws were saying that the seeds that you hold is the government state. It did not explicitly say it belongs to the government, but we can glean from the law's implementation that these seeds belong to the state, and you weren't allowed to share with the farmers or plant on your own. And these aspects we will see in the modern, which I will come in a moment. So now the second part of my presentation is to now looking at this theoretical sort of, how laws get enacted in historical time period. I'm looking at under the, the seed sharing practices of the farmer and regulation of plants and plant intellectual property. So in Bhutan, if using that seed, if new crop varieties are being bred and produced, it's protected by the plant variety under the Biodiversity Act of 2001. If that crop variety meets specific criteria, like which is called dust criteria. The term of protection provided generally 20 years and 25 years for trees and vines. But the fundamental aspect of my presentation is the holder of ownership over this kind of innovation and invention through what is called modern intellectual property system. And here, the patent system comes into picture. Now, under the Industrial Property Act, for the patents, which protects the plants and seeds, became operational in 2012. And there were already patent applications from abroad which claimed, plant genetic resources under that application. And you'll see that in this act, the section 4 defines what is invention, in the general terms of what is an invention. And section 5.4 provides for what is unpatentable invention under agriculture. And section 3 enumerates some of the legal rights that are being provided by the patent registration once once the government determines that the patent will receive registration. So at this point of discussion, between the different agencies in Bhutan, the Biodiversity Center, the patent traditional medicine or Ministry of Health, these agencies have institutional understanding of if a patent is being claimed in a patent application, they have to declare where is the source of origin of that plant genetic resources in that application for disclosure requirement. But mind you, this is not there legally under the 2001, but it's an institutional arrangement. Bhutan is a member for the Convention on Biodiversity Development, CBD, and there, because Bhutan has also become compliance to Nagoya Protocol requiring protection of the plant genetic resources under access and benefit sharing system. So Patent Office is one of the access points, ABS checkpoints for determining that the use of plant genetic resources forming part institutionally, the information institutionally shared for the purposes of registration and granting of rights on that patent application. So patent granted is protected for 20 years from the date of grant. From the date of application. Now, even in Bhutan, which has not escaped the elimination of what is called historically, when British missions came to Bhutan, they observed that there were some crop varieties which were being already grown and it was being documented, like the rice germ plasm. But there were also other crop varieties which were also introduced in Bhutan, which is, like, for example, potato is a widely popular case. It's a case of plant introduction in Bhutan by the British who traveled to Bhutan. So under this, in the modern context comes what's the private seed sector sector, which brings huge investment in breeding new crop varieties for food markets or food production system. And here, the agribusiness industry or the biotech industry, these days, they're involved much more in producing what's called genetically modified stake for the private industry, bringing huge investment to protect their innovation and invention in the plants. Now, going a little back to US system. In the US, these laws were introduced and protection of plants became possible in 1930s. After that, this was firstly for sexually bred plant. In 1970s, they introduced plant variety protection, which is for sexually reproduced. 1980, they also introduced and became what's called the eligibility of patent protection over plants. So this trajectory of how law has played role in shaping the protection of seeds and plants got evolved, and the plants became eligible for. So this is my last slide. I'm looking at the seed circulation again as the basic practice of farmers for breeding new crop varieties, or looking at the local landrace varieties as the foundational stock for breeding new crop varieties for future food security requirements. Once newly bred under threat by climatic changes or disease or pest system, you have always the option to roll back to the local landrace varieties. So in that context, the seed keepers of Teotihuacan, which the Bhutan Broadcasting Service ran program, were showing how the seed community there preserves the local land races, local landrace varieties, and preserve system of, if you borrow a ball of seed from that center, in the next harvest, you have to bring about 2 balls of seeds back to that center. This is to ensure that the seed multiplication keeps ongoing for the community, and the crop does not become extinct, and the cultivation of that particular crop keeps on going. In order for that to occur, under the Biodiversity Act, Section 18 provides that exemption for farmers to carry on with their age-old traditional practice of seed sharing. Now, some of you might have heard cases about how in US or European countries where the farmers growing seeds in their own fields were prosecuted and trialed in courts under the infringement of patents or intellectual property rights. This is because commercially bred seeds were legally bounded by these rights that you are not allowed to grow and commercially multiply that seed and benefit from the seed. But under this exemption, you are allowed to do that non-commercial basis and for household production farming purposes. But fundamentally, to me, the patent protection exerts much greater proprietary control on the property, and the patent system in particular should also embed the farmer exemption for unhindered agriculture farming system in Bhutan. So on that note, because Bhutan is not yet member to 2 of the very important multilateral trading system, which is the World Trade Organization and the Union for Protection of Plant Varieties, which provides all of this legal systems to seed sharing practices. The Bhutan patent acts also need to embrace this legal system in there if future amendments or future changes in the law happen simultaneously with the other biodiversity regulation and the seed control system. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kencho. In the interest of time, I think I have some remarks, but I think we'll go straight to the discussant first. So may I please call upon the discussant, Dr. Astamaya Tama, to offer her
Okay.
remark.
All right. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Please confirm if you can hear me, La. Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thanks to the Center for, first of all, I want to thank me to be one of the discussants for this important session. La. As moderator mentioned, I'm in one of the remote kiosks in Dagana, and internet is not that stable. So there are chances that you might lose me in between. But anyway, I tried to provide some feedbacks. Um, yes, as a moderator also mentioned that I actually work for the National Biodiversity Center, which is. Thank you very much, Mr. Kencho Peldon, for a very good, very rich presentation on a very important topic, that is regulating farmer seed saving practices and plant intellectual property rights in Bhutan. You touched upon different themes, seed circulation, distribution, sharing, all those within the broader. And also, I think you talk about the patent over seed as a career of plant genetic resources and all that. And it's very, interesting. And and you rightly mentioned that these genetic resources are foundational stock for breeding new varieties for our future food security, for food seed security. So since I am from National Biodiversity Center, I would like to bring presenters, the organizers, that one among many mandates of National Biodiversity Center is to coordinate and also implement biodiversity conservation and sustainable utilization in Bhutan. And to address, there are different diverse components of biodiversity. So we at National Biodiversity Center, we have different 6 different technical programs trying to address different components of conservation. Bhutan. Now, one of those 6 technical programs within the National Biodiversity Center is called PGR, which actually is Agricultural Plant Genetic Resources Program. So, as I mentioned, there are 6 important technical programs at our center, at the National Biodiversity Center at the Ministry of Agriculture. So one is Plant Genetic Resources Program, that is actually looking after the crop diversity. So being cultivated and maintained by the farmers, and it is very important component within the agriculture plant genetic resources program, because of course the plant genetic resources would consist of many components, crop diversity, traditional crop varieties, crop world relatives, released varieties, modern varieties, improved varieties, denotified varieties, etc. So when we system that presenter mentioned, in a seed system, and seed system both formal, that is being introduced by our ministry, and also the farmer seed system that our presenter Kencho Peldon mentioned, and more importantly this farmer seed system. So we at this topic that was presented by Mr. Kencho Peldon, very important and it's very significant. And as Bhutan is very rich in biodiversity, and so in terms of local crop, traditional or local crop or traditional or indigenous traditional varieties. And well, Mr. Kencho mentioned that it's a foundation for food security, for future food security, but it is also very important. Well, I feel addition to it being important and foundation for food security, these traditional crop varieties, local varieties, indigenous varieties of crops that are being cultivated and maintained by our farmers, they are very important in, I mean, they play important role in conferring resilience to the farming system. Now we talk about climate change, adverse effects of climate change. So when it comes to, climate change, we talk about the crop diversity. We say that sowing diversity is also harvesting security, harvesting food security, harvesting seed security, harvesting nutritional security. So it's not only important to look at from the angle of this germplasm as a foundation for food security, but it is also important. It also plays an important role in conferring resilience to the farming system. And well, as important for breeding new varieties and all, because they are the reservoir of important potential genes to enhance the nutritional quality. If you compare these improved varieties and local varieties, if I may just cite an example, Ichum and Jachum. Ichum, it is very nutritious. They contain very high nutritive value. Some of these traditional crop varieties possess medicinal properties. They also play very important role in religious and cultural significance. If we lose some of these traditional varieties, it might affect our culture, it might affect our tradition. They are deeply associated and interlinked with our tradition and culture. For example, if I say Dugze is from the mustard, yellow mustard. If you don't have this yellow mustard, the culture of using the Dugze in our religious practices, it might affect in the long run. So, and then these traditional varieties, I mean, Bhutan is very diverse country with a very diverse topography and environment. In such an environment, there is a need for diverse crops and traditional farmers varieties. And there is a need to also strengthen this farmer seed system. So this our traditional crop varieties possess genes. They are the reservoir of genes to adapt to different. When we have diversity of crops, they also provide the nutritional diversity, the dietary diversity, which is the basis for good health. There is a saying, you are exactly what you eat. So so this is not only the basis for foundation for food security, but it's overall it is important for holistic development, sustainable development, security, seed security. Actually, what happens is that when you talk about food security, yes, we want to enhance our food production, we want to minimize import of food, so we want to enhance food production. So in the process, sometimes we tend to overlook these farmers varieties, and we tend to promote this improved and hybrids, and maybe, of course, not in Bhutan the GMO, but of course in other countries also promotion of GMOs, in the process resulting in loss of our own varieties, crop varieties, which are our agrobiological wealth. It is a national heritage. So, well, NBC would like to take this opportunity to call upon all the participants, the organizers, the presenters, to give due importance to these traditional farmers, traditional varieties, the indigenous varieties, the local varieties that our farmers are growing, because these also contributes to seed security, which is important for Kencho Peldon's slide number 14. Nagi Sundebal, I mean, you mentioned about this Biodiversity Act of Bhutan 2003. And yes, you're right, but I'm not sure. You might be already aware, but if in case you're not aware of, we have now finalized this Biodiversity Bill of Bhutan to repeal that Biodiversity Act of Bhutan 2003. So, there are many chapters in that new Biodiversity Bill. It has been finalized, and one of the chapters, I think it is chapter 4 or probably chapter 4, I don't have it with me, but chapter 4 talks about this protection of plant varieties that you mentioned about. Particularly, we talk about this, not this conventional protection of plant varieties, but it is called a sui generis system of protection of plant varieties. I think sui generis means our own type. It's, system. And in the Biodiversity Act of Bhutan, you did mention about the three criteria, the DAS criteria, distinct uniformity and stability. But in the new bill, there are three categories of varieties. And there are three categories of varieties, and also there are, I think there are 5 criteria against one distinct, uniform and stability. There are also other two criteria, that's novelty and identifiability. So there are, as I mentioned, there are 3 categories of plant varieties. One is new uniform plant varieties, and in that, those criteria, thus and the novelty is a must. Then there is another category of crop varieties, that is Dinalu. There are 3 criteria: novelty, distinctness, and then identifiability. Now, importantly, there is also this traditional farmers varieties in this new biodiversity bill. And there, what is important is only the identifiability. And those other, those are the strict criteria like dust. Those things are not applicable when it comes to protecting these traditional varieties. Endorsed. We have tabled for next session, parliamentary session, for this deliberation. So, and along with this, I also would like to take this opportunity to call upon all the stakeholders, policymakers, that it is important also to look at the social seed network, especially the informal farmers seed system, like seed. And when it comes to seed system, to see how resilient our community is when it comes to seed system. So I think this is all that I have to say. So it's very generic kind of feedback, and specifically on your slide number, I think number 14. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rastamayatama. And Kencho, I think that anything you might have to add, but for everyone else here too, I think that we really enjoyed listening to the longer history of how we got to the present, and in many ways it reminded me of, so I think what you are, so from me, from my point of view as a social scientist, but not necessarily an agriculture person. So what I see you as doing is that you are drawing attention to these longer histories in order to tell us how there are histories of regulation of crops, and there are histories of regulation that are marked by these larger forces, and some of those were imperial forces that were at work globally. So that part is sort of the backdrop to the questions that you want to ask in the present about present day Bhutan and about present day Bhutan's seed saving practices. So in that sense, I mean, I think it's important for all of us to remember that every present question has a much longer history, and in that sense, that political and other forces that were part of how it became normalized to intervene in the processes through which farmers grow their own crops, whether cotton or any other. And in places, it reminded me of, the work of someone like Timothy Mitchell, not on agriculture, but, when he talks about carbon, and he essentially, there are historians who look at specific products and then trace political histories or other histories, intellectual histories through those products. And I saw part of what you were doing. The other thing that it reminded me of is, and this may also be specifically of interest to you, is how, our very ideas, especially in the 19th century that you are looking at so much, how our very ideas of even something like what it means to be rational, and I can give you later the specific citation for this, are actually linked to many of these questions and problems of governance and control. So for instance, you would have, the imperial kind of, so if we look at the British Empire, for instance, the exhortation to farmers in one part of the empire that they should move from subsistence economy to cash economy when growing crops, and in another part that they should move from growing one particular crop to rubber, because of course rubber plantations were profitable, or things like that, that these often different or sometimes contradictory or varying rationales that were provided to different parts, to farmers in different parts of the empire, were not, well, we want you to do this because this is going to be profitable for us, right? It was formulated in the language of, to be rational, to be growing rationally these crops rationally, you need to be moving to this sort of production system. So actually, basically, the rationales and the very rationalities through which many of the kind of means of governance, intervention, and regulation into areas that in historically were not part of, were not thought of as being Now I have, there's one question for you, but before that, I mean, I want, obviously, as I said to the, you're working on a PhD, right? You're working on doctoral work, yeah? You're working on a doctorate.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
Yes, we would be certainly, as I said in my remarks at the start, we would be very interested in getting papers from this for a volume. And I think for your, for your paper, and because, thanks to the remarks of our discussant as well, I think for you, we're thinking of question that you are asking, is that really about, I mean, after you tell us the histories of regulation, is your central question how the kind of Bhutanese system of the patent types, how is that, what is the interface of that with the international legal system around plant intellectual property? Is that your question? Like, is that the interface between these? Because I follow the longer histories of regulation, that you were getting at. And I think that we also have a question from, I'm afraid I can only read the name as Mac. So Mac, could you please go ahead and ask your question? Thanks to everyone for their patience. I mean, we are all learners, but especially for early career researchers, it's important that we be patient and understanding, and we are overrunning with time. So I accept that. Mac, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And somehow I've been also invited as a discussant to this topic because it is very relevant to us, but like because of the fact that there has to be only one discussant, so Dr. Asta became the main discussant. But most of the things have been already like talked by Kencho sir and Dr. Asta, but I also would like to maybe supplement on what they have said. Bhutan being a system, 90 different type of cereals is integral part of our like culture and tradition. And if you look at our 90% of our seed system is informal seed system, meaning where farmers share, exchange, everything, and the formal seed system, something like Monsanto, Syngenta, and at the moment Bhutan is like promoting this informal system and recognizing it. And we have a IP system which also which also protect farmers bred varieties as well as breeder bred varieties, But at the same time, being an agrarian society where 90% of our seed system is informal, where farmers are deeply involved, we have to recognize this, So because of the fact, because of this, the Biodiversity Act of Bhutan 2003, way back in 2003, have recognized that no, we have to recognize this informal system and promote, because if you system, it will really impact the food security and the nutrient security, everything, So I would like to say that because of this, and again, recently when we revised the Biodiversity Act of Bhutan 2003, we have incorporated this and we have strengthened this. Although we have this the plant which are protected under Biodiversity Act and under the Patent Act, we have also give some liberty where we can give our farmers to even at the a traditional context, they can be allowed to sell or maybe use that protected variety. So we have incorporated this, And looking back, we have given the formal seed system and this plant variety breeding is not picking up in Bhutan. Although Biodiversity Act of Bhutan was enacted in 2003, and we have given the room for the breeders to come up, 18 years down the line, we haven't protected, So this is coming up, but at the same time, we have to really recognize and give exemptions to farmers, our farmers, so that this informal system can be maintained. Allah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Indeed, we are grateful. I think that following on from this, the thing that you from 2003 to the new bill. And I think that a focus specifically on going from, the longer history of till 2003, yes, but specifically in the Bhutan context from 2003 to the new bill. What is that, what is that story? I mean, I'm sure I can easily see that as a thesis chapter, but I can also see that as an article. I think we'll just have a last brief remark from Dr. Asta, because I can see her hand raised, unless that is you very briefly, and then we'll yes, please go ahead.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Mani, for supplementing additional information. And again, I would like to touch, refer to Kencho's mention about seed keepers of different programs. That there are two sub-programs, that is ex situ conservation and on-farm conservation of crop diversity. So in the ex situ conservation, this crop diversity that we have in Bhutan, the traditional farmers varieties or local varieties or the indigenous varieties are conserved in the gene bank as ex situ collection. But also, in a complementary manner, we have farm conservation in about one community seed bank in Bhutan, but there are other community seed banks as well. One in Bumthang, then the other two in Gomdar and Kunsotang. So the very reason why we promote the community seed bank is to enhance resilience to the adverse effect of climate change. Again, to add to the adverse effect of those climate change. Because when we have these seeds in the farmers field and in the community seed bank, these are exposed to the changing environment. But the ones that are in the gene bank stop the evolutionary process. So this is just to bring an information that you mentioned about the seed keepers of Deutangla. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Kencho, would you like to say anything briefly to respond?
Yes. All the commenters. Thank you, Dr. Asta, Mani, for providing this very useful updates on what's been happened since after 2003, and it's very good to know the bill has been, bill has encompassed a lot of the law lacked in 2003. So thank you very much, and I do agree with all of the comments that you two have provided, and I'm certainly. I would also like to thank Dr. Nitasha for drawing attention to Timothy Mitchell's work. I've looked at his work in Africa, and it's very enriching in terms of following through how imperial politics and imperial sort of shapes the industrial commodity production. This paper is a kind of my thesis actually focuses on the system under like the plant variety protection under the United Union for Plant Variety Protection, UPOC, and also International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources, and WTO, which is World Trade Organization protection for under the TRIPS requirement, which is the trade-related aspects of intellectual property, and looked at the precursor of how these have emerged from the British Empire, and that inform the modern genealogy of how lawmaking gets evolved. And India is a specific case that I've taken for the fact that the British Empire was very strong in the 19th and the early part of 18th century in terms of commodity transaction. But I'm also not forgetting one aspect of the British involvement in India is the independent, the existence of princely states, and this also provides valuable insight into how modern laws get shaped. And I'm looking at all of these features at how lawmaking gets. Unfortunately, in my thesis, I'm not looking at Bhutan's specific, but this one is very interesting for me because I'm looking Bhutan's because I have worked under the government IP system and plans and plant genetic resources with so this has been a side kind of interest that evolved, and I'm I have written so much in terms of Bhutan's own intellectual property and plant genetic resources, seeds, and all that. But my major thesis is going to focus on all this genealogies of agriculture, looking at, I'm sure you're aware about how, 19th century, politics, a political economy on agriculture, and also shaping systems have shaped the modern intellectual property system, and looking at, and for this kind of examination has required me to go even to dating back to laws in England in 13th century, how they regulated dress and consumption of certain other products, that modern laws are being shaped. And so in that aspect, certainly this project will be my heart to me. It's very very dear upon writing on this project. But thank you so much for all these comments, and I'm certainly going to rework on the aspects of all you have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kencho. I truly enjoyed your presentation and also these remarks. I mean, we're looking essentially, I think I see your interest as being in kind of tracing the longer genealogy of these regulatory rationales, right? And that epistemological investigation actually is really important and rarely undertaken. For everyone here, I think we heard you about that, about those histories, and then the other things that I think are interesting to audiences like this are questions of resilience, how questions of resilience are deeply central to this, the interface between the Bhutanese and the international kind of situation, and also the 2003 onwards, like that, like a specific paper maybe. I mean, if I can think of like the next 3 papers or 4 papers that your the resilience aspect with the cultural significance. You have a paper simply on 2003 onwards, and then of course you have the longer kind of histories of regulations. So you're blessed that way. Thank you so much.